My name's Jonathan, and this is my presentation about the 15th Sustainable Development Goal. In this presentation, I will be addressing a new genetic technology which could potentially aid the 15th UN Sustainable Development Goal. This goal is named Life on Land, and this goal is aimed to restore and protect all of the Earth's precious ecosystems and its environment. Now, let's take a step back and learn more about the history of the United Nations SDGs. These goals were in the works since 1992, when at the Earth Summit, the UN devised a plan for sustainable development and to improve human lives and to protect the environment. Then, in 2015, they established an agenda for sustainable development comprising of 17 goals at its foundation. These goals are set in the hope that all the countries involved in the Sustainable Development Goals will improve society, hunger, healthcare, education, green energy, hunger, and climate change in their countries. Now that we know the motivation behind the United Nations SDGs, why don't we look at who this is trying to help? The people immediately impacted by the 15th SDG are the people who still live off the land, everyone who goes outside, anyone who even cares remotely about the environment. This Sustainable Development Goal impacts everyone on Earth because without our delicately balanced ecosystems, our whole world will change. And it is changing. Climate change is more real now than ever before, and we are experiencing more severe and sporadic weather events. Loss of biodiversity, soil degradation, temperatures rising, just to list a few consequences of climate change, which is a result of us not managing resources and destroying ecosystems that keep our global system balanced. Now come with me. Now, you might ask the question, how is this problem further exacerbated by a growing population? This problem is exacerbated by a growing population. In short, more people equals even more people. And all these people need amenities, like food, water, housing, resources, etc. And we need to use land to get all of these different resources, and we need land for people to build on, and we need land to mainly grow our food on. Now, to live our Western lifestyle, we also need a ton of energy. And the more energy we use, the more pollutants we release. And this is just an example of a summarized chain reaction of what happens during population growth and what happens because of a growing population. To sum up what I just rambled on about, the larger the population we have, the more land we need and resources we consume. We are currently using 3/4 of the Earth's habitable land to support human life. To make it worse, we aren't even doing it sustainably. To help us visualize what I just described to you, I created a model. Meet Mr. Villager. Like I said, Mr. Villager needs housing, food, and resources. These three are represented by the red carpet he stands on. Now we have 2 villagers. They obviously take double the land that only Mr. Villager needed. And now we come to 4 villagers. We see that the land that 1 villager used quadrupled because the number of villagers quadrupled. And when these villagers go on to have more babies, and those babies have more babies, we grow exponentially. And also, our land use grows exponentially. But our world only has a finite amount of habitable land. And like I said, we are already using 3/4 of our habitable land on Earth. And to make it worse, we aren't even doing it sustainably. The root causes of the deforestation of our ecosystems and life on land are pollution and deforestation/habitat destruction, which result in the loss of keystone species and the loss of biodiversity, which brings our planet its balance. Our population growth means that we need to use more space for housing and agriculture to feed the population. which as I mentioned before causes a whole bunch of problems, but for this SDG I'm presenting on, there are only two main points of concern. Firstly, pollution comes in all sorts of shapes and forms. It is all the garbage we create from tires to plastic bags. It is also fuel that we burn to power our cars and our homes. Another form of pollution is the chemicals used on farmers' fields to protect the harvest from bugs, which runs off into the creeks and rivers, killing the ecosystem and poisoning the land. If we keep polluting the way we do, we will destroy our fragile ecosystem and reduce biodiversity dramatically. Secondly, as the population grows, we will continue to need more land to feed and house the population. This forces us to cut down more forests, mow over more meadows, and pave over more wetlands. If we continue to grow without becoming more efficient and sustainable, we're going to run out of diverse ecosystems. There will no longer be enough biodiversity to support our planet. Climate change will only worsen and become more aggressive. Now, you may ask, is there any evidence or data that supports the concern around this problem? There are many sources that will tell you the same thing. For example, look at these graphs below. One showing all the species that are threatened by extinction. Though not explicitly mentioned, these are most likely facing extinction because of the factors I mentioned earlier, which was deforestation and pollution. We can also see the area of forests that was cut down in 2020. Deforestation is mostly driven by agriculture and the need for more land for farming. In case you're curious, this is my real skin. In the early recordings, for some reason, my avatar wouldn't load, and I was just this random girl. But no, this is my skin. So, yeah. Now, to move on to our second question. Describe and explain your chosen biotechnology. Selective breeding. This new technique is being used all around the world to help us achieve our UN SDG number 15. This technique helps us create a diverse gene pool of an endangered or threatened species of animal or plant. It allows us to select pairs and force them to mate and create the most genetically diverse offspring as possible. This protects the species from extinction. It also increases the population, provides genetically diverse offspring, and allows us to create a backup population just in case the wild population goes extinct. And it also gives us a great opportunity to educate the public about the importance of biodiversity and conservation. Though we are not altering and cutting genes or using growth hormones, this is still a very important piece of genetic engineering. So, just a little example, I have butterflies. These are our endangered blue butterflies. These guys are all caught in the wild, and now we bring them here, where they're safe. And they might try and escape if I need that. Then we take pairs like these and breed them like I mentioned. Their offspring will contribute back to the population and hopefully allow us to re-establish a wild population. Time to address the question, how does your technology help achieve/address your chosen UN sustainability goal that you described in part 1? This biotechnology is going to help us achieve the life on land goal by allowing humans to help prevent the extinction of endangered/at-risk species. This helps preserve keystone species that are specialized to certain ecosystems that are found rarely across the globe. To help us understand the importance of biodiversity, let me paint you a picture. Imagine there were no more pesky mosquitoes anymore. No more itchy bug bites and stinky DEET bug spray. Everyone would be happy that the pests are finally gone, and there is no reason to hide inside during dusk. A few weeks pass, and you notice the birds aren't singing as much anymore, and those cute little bats aren't flying around. Then as time goes on, there are no more frogs croaking at night, and fewer hawks circling around during the sunny afternoons. Then you throw your line in the water, and realize that there are much fewer trout than there used to be. All of these predators' populations declined, and some can't adapt and die out. This is simple. This is just a simple example of why every species is so important to its ecosystem, and why biodiversity is so crucial to the health of our planet. Like I have been saying, our world is a delicate seesaw where every species matters, and to tip one way or the other would greatly affect our lives. Now that we understand the importance of this technique and how this technique can help accomplish our development goal, we need to learn how it works. All breeding programs are carried out in a controlled environment, either zoos or animal sanctuaries of something of that nature. A program requires a pool of individuals that are not closely related as to prevent inbreeding and the lack of genetic diversity. Then, taking these individuals, they breed them in such a way that they create a genetically diverse offspring, which is often more immune to disease and less likely to be born with mutations. They do this in the most efficient, reasonable way possible, to create an abundance of animals that could hopefully be reintroduced back into the wild and help establish a successful breeding population. This all happens in three main steps: a founding phase, a growth phase, and a capacity phase. The first phase, the founding phase, is where animals are captured from the wild without having a severe effect on the remaining population. The second effect, called the growth phase, like I mentioned earlier, they breed them as fast as reasonably possible to help regain the population. Then, in the third phase, is when they have a large enough population that they are able to maintain the captive population and have some that are released into the wild. So, to demonstrate, I've built a little animal sanctuary. These are my bears: Winnie, Mowgli, Deshaun, Michael Jackson, Mr. T the big dog.
I am the one your son don't need a gun to get.
Curtis, Prince II, Barack, and Damon. These are all wild bears that have been taken from a natural habitat and put in animal sanctuaries for the sake of protection and breeding. Then, they come over here to the breeding area, where we can hopefully create the most genetically diverse offspring as possible. Mr. and Mrs. Smith will then go on to create that's your cue. Well, they'll hopefully go on to create a small little cub that we will be able to foster and nurture in captivity, and then hopefully release into the wild. You guys kind of let me down. Well, all of these different breeding programs do run into their own problems, and sometimes this can happen. And there are always small setbacks that we will face in breeding programs, based on the individuals themselves. But we are always able to overcome these issues and hopefully restore nature. Now you may ask, how does your chosen technology provide a way to meet your UN sustainability goal? This technique is broadly considered the most effective form of conservation of species facing habitat loss. Captive breeding helps our efforts to sustain life on land, because it gives us a way to ensure that a species won't become extinct. These programs are started when we notice a decline in populations in the wild and when they become extremely close to extinction. They gather individuals from the wild and keep them in captivity. This is sort of an insurance just in case that the species don't go extinct in their natural habitat. Hopefully, before that happens, we create new individuals that are healthy enough that they are able to be reintroduced back into the wild and hopefully survive and reintegrate with the remaining wild population. These programs are a method of ensuring that we can conserve biodiversity even if the worst were to happen and their habitat destroyed. Now, to field another one of your questions, evaluate the feasibility of your technology. This method is very feasible and plausible because of its general simplicity. There is no complex genetic editing or any severe risk using this technique. Also, due to the number of animal sanctuaries and zoos across the world, there is no lack of space that could be used to undertake this process. A subsequent question might be, is it currently in use? Yes. Many zoos and animal sanctuaries are using this method to preserve and breed healthy offspring in a controlled environment. For instance, look at these guys. A key breeding program close to home is the Toronto Zoo Vancouver Island Marmot Breeding Program. These cute little critters were driven to near extinction in the late 90s. At that time, there were a total of 30 Vancouver Island marmots left in the wild. 6 were caught and cared for by the Toronto Zoo. Now, they have currently released around 200 individuals back to Vancouver Island, where they now have a stable breeding population. The captive breeding program continues to reach their goal of releasing 400 to 600 marmots back onto the island. This is just one of many success stories where indigenous populations are able to recover and prosper. Now, you can also see on this graph below of their statistics of releasing new animals back into the wild. Is it effective? Yes. As we saw before, there are successful breeding programs, but there are few instances where it's not able to both produce a successful breeding population in captivity and establish a strong, healthy population that can be reintroduced back into its natural habitat. Typically, conservationists are able to acquire a healthy, adequate breeding population, but the hard part is having the individuals healthy enough to be reintroduced into the wild. This is simply because they are not able to experience life in the wild and build that resilience and strength of living in their natural habitat while they're in captivity. Are there any results that demonstrate its potential? Yes, there are many success stories that demonstrate the potential captive breedings have to restore near extinct populations and bring them back to being self-sustaining. A great example of this is the Californian condor. Now come on in. This situation really showed how much potential captive breeding has. In the 1960s, the Californian condor was driven to near extinction, having only 22 individuals left in the wild. After much thought and consideration, conservationists captured the remaining 22 individuals and took them into captivity, sending them to zoos where they could be monitored and protected, but most importantly, bred. These birds are very hard to breed and only lay one egg at a time and are monogamous, meaning they mate for life. Their chicks also take 6 to 7 years to mature until they are able to breed. After 50 years of conservation efforts, turned the depressing situation into a successful breeding program. As of 2010, there are 350 condors that have been fostered in zoos across the country and over 180 released back into the wild. This story shows that with patience, determination, and adaptability, we are able to conserve and restore biodiversity even against all odds. And here's a graph showing the rapid increase of these condors. Now, let's go release some condors. Fly high, young bloods. Be free. Be free, damn it. Wow, how beautiful. Now you may ask, is it scalable? Yes, but it all depends on which species you are trying to breed. Breeding frogs is going to be much easier than breeding elephants. Some species are much better than others at reproducing at a large scale. For example, salmon lay thousands of eggs, making them very scalable. Meanwhile, a bird like the condor only lay one egg, which isn't so great. It, in the end, is scalable to some degree no matter what the species of animal is that is being conserved. It is also relatively simple to operate a breeding program. Yes, they all come with different problems and obstacles, but the basic necessities of a breeding program are simple, especially with animals that don't require a large territory or social groups. Also, All zoos and breeding programs create the most genetically diverse offspring, so the offspring are healthy and resilient to disease, especially in captivity. In short, yes, it is scalable to some degree, but it all depends on what you're trying to breed, and the necessities of each species will vary. And one of the most important questions, are there any limitations? And yes, of course, there are many limitations to these breeding programs. Major limitations being funding, habitat health, and behavior. Starting with funding. Funding is a major limitation because these breeding programs are not cheap. They need the space, time, and technology to have a successful breeding program. Just like humans, all animals need food and shelter provided for them to successfully survive. Maintaining the animals' enclosures is already expensive. Then that price increases the larger the animals are. Then on top of that, you need the veterinary staff with the proper experience and education to run the breeding program. Finally, they need all the proper tools and equipment to do the job, and all of this costs money. And other than zoos, animals don't make much money. Secondly, habitat health. It is almost redundant to have a breeding program for a species if there's no more wild habitat for those animals to be released in. If there is no habitat for those animals to go back to, they slowly become domesticated and experience genetic bottlenecks. Lastly, captive breeding programs work best as to boost existing population and give conservationists time to recover and preserve the animals' natural habitat. Also, if they are left in captivity for too long, there is a risk they lose their natural instincts, and if they were to be returned to the wild, they will lack the knowledge it takes to survive. To help visualize all the demands of a captive breeding program, I have this handy dandy graph. That is a simple, watered down version of all the essentials to a captive breeding program. Now, an important question that has been posed is, what needs to be done to improve this technology in order to make it a widespread and effective solution? Well, captive breeding programs face a wide range of diverse problems for each new species they have to breed. These problems are typically due to the fact that they are in captivity and unable to choose a proper mate, which also affects their reproductive efficiency. They also face the issue of acclimatizing to their wild environment when they're released. Now, this acclimatizing could be improved using CRISPR. This technology could be used to cut certain genes and replace them with more beneficial mutations and adaptations. Many of these animals that are being captively bred are facing habitat loss and some alteration to their natural ecosystem. The very famous and significant keystone species that could benefit from genetic editing and altering are corals. They provide the habitat for the world's most diverse area for marine life. They are also significant because they hold 25% of the total fish species on Earth and over 1 million aquatic vertebrates and reliant organisms. Coral reefs also collect 70 to 90 million tons of carbon dioxide every year. That just shows how important these species of aquatic animals are. What if we were to genetically edit coral during its replication cycle while it's still a gamete, so that the coral becomes more temperature resistant and can handle the rising temperatures of the ocean? This resiliency to hotter temperatures will not only give new hope for biodiversity of our oceans, but also give us more time to figure out how to slow climate change. As we've all heard in the news, the Great Barrier Reef is under threat, and so are countless other regions where coral reefs thrive. This is because the global average temperature rising, which causes the surface temperatures of our oceans to rise. These corals are very sensitive, and due to the rising temperatures, have gone into this bleaching state where they all die. This is very, very harmful to their natural biodiverse ecosystems, which they are the keystone species to. Now, Here on this graph, we can see the global surface temperature on the rise and is only continuing to rise unless we do something about it. Many species are very sensitive to temperature changes such as coral, and these coral are a keystone foundation of our ocean ecosystem. Breeding programs is on the habitat restoration side. The goal for all of these captive breeding programs is to release all these animals and plants back into their natural habitat. Also, the reason we need to breed them is mainly because they have nearly gone extinct because of their habitats have been destroyed. Most of this habitat destruction is from the land that is used as agriculture and farming. Now, what if we were to increase the growth rate in the plants that we use to restore the animal's natural habitat? This could be achieved by increasing the photosynthetic efficiency of plants. On average, plants only convert around 2% of solar energy, making these plants very inefficient. This is because of things like photorespiration and other variables, like usable light wavelengths, chlorophyll pigments, and the amount of CO2 present. If we were able to modify the photosystems inside the chloroplasts so that they would be able to absorb the maximum amount of photons that charge the electrons powering the BF6 complex to create the largest electrochemical gradient to power the ATP synthase, and subsequently power the NADPH reductase. Wow, that was a mouthful. The modification of the chlorophyll pigments would make the light-dependent reaction process more efficient and thus create more energy to create more sugar during the Calvin cycle, thus overall creating more energy to power the growth of native plants, hopefully increasing growth so that we can use them to restore habitat that was lost for the captively bred animals. These modifications will hopefully speed up the growth and thus speed up the rate which we can restore habitat. As we can see in this graph, if we were able to modify the pigments of the chlorophyll so that they would absorb a larger range of wavelengths of light instead of only absorbing very specific and niche ranges of light, it would provide the plant with much more energy. We would want our trees and plants to grow as fast as possible using this genetically modified section of the photosystem to create habitat much faster than before instead of having to wait for all the plants to grow and mature, which often takes years. Now, let's show you the speed at which we want our trees to grow.
A few moments later.
And just like that, we would want our trees to grow as fast as possible, just like I mentioned earlier, to help restore the habitat as fast as possible and get those animals back out there. That was the end of my project. I really hope you enjoyed, and I had a lot of fun making it. I hope you really enjoy sitting down and watching it, and I hope you had a lot of fun, because I sure did have a ton of fun making this video and editing it. Yeah, I gotta say, you're one of the best teachers, because what other class, or what other teacher could I make a Minecraft video for? Thanks for always being so supportive, and always being so positive. You're the GOAT, Mr. T. See you later.